Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Shay,
and Cody,
as we take you on a journey through some of the Midwest's most interesting, strange, paranormal, and sometimes unsettling stories here at Cinister Exploration. So today we're going to be going through the history and interesting stories about Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio. But before we get into that, since this is our first episode, we wanted to give you a little background information about us and our plan for this podcast. Cody, get us started with your origin story.
Sure. So I was raised Pentecostal. Growing up Pentecostal, we believed in exorcisms, demons. So that kind of sparked my interest. And then my childhood home, there was actually quite a few paranormal experiences. Stuff being moved around in my bedroom, doors being opened when they shouldn't be. So, and then I started investigating paranormal probably about 15, 16 years ago.
Okay.
What about you?
Well, as far as my paranormal start, when I was about 9 years old, I went on a family vacation to Colonial Williamsburg, and we went in the public hospital, which was built in 1773.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know if you've been there or not, but it was America's first hospital dedicated to treating the mentally ill. But in 1773, even though that was like a great endeavor, how they treated people was not
Right.
great. You know, there were small cells and there were shackles. And when we went in, I had a vision, a flash of what it looked like, and with doctors there and everything. And I didn't think anything about it at the time. Went out into the back courtyard, happened again, did not think anything about it. I am not a sensitive. I am not a psychic or anything like that. But I was watching a YouTube video about Colonial Williamsburg, and that memory came back to me. And I was like, oh, that's really strange. I remember very distinctly this image that I had. And then as I watched paranormal shows, I've heard people talk about that is sometimes common for people to have these visions of just a flash image. So it's like, oh, okay, I'm interested in the paranormal, like you. It's been about 15 or 16 years. I would say I'm a Fox Mulder type. I want to believe. I feel like the more I do it, the more skeptical I am.
Right. Is that because you don't get a lot of evidence every time?
Yes. And then, there's so many things that you go through about like, well, that could be this, that could be this. And then debunking becomes kind of your goal of the investigation. And then, all of the equipment that you bring along, you doubt or you second guess the nature of it. So I think as you and I have learned as we've done these and gone to seminars, maybe no equipment is the better way to go. And
Exactly.
Trusting yourself, because you lose so much of what's happening watching a piece of equipment. So I think that's what we've started doing for sure. And over here is Jeremy. Jeremy is my lovely husband and our producer. Jeremy, what is your take on the paranormal?
Well, nobody can see me, but I am here in the corner. For me, it's really hard to believe in things that I can't see or prove beyond a doubt. So I think I come at things more of from a debunking standpoint, like what could it be? That has a, I don't know, quote unquote, rational explanation. But I'm trying to be more open, thanks to you. So, yeah.
Appreciate it. And then Cody, who are you outside of paranormal investigations and weird stuff?
So, side note, Shay and I actually used to work together, but I since went back into hotel management. So I've done that for almost 20 years. Still am in church, just kind of left the Pentecostal church, went to Episcopal. Married to a great husband for almost 10 years. And, well, I love God and ghouls.
Yep, we did used to work together, and I'm so, so thankful that we crossed paths because you are absolutely my kindred weirdo. And I do have that day job still, but outside of that, I spend most of my time working in and volunteering in animal rescue. So I'm a lead member of the My Furry Valentine team, which is one of the nation's largest mega animal adoption weekends. It happens the weekend after Valentine's Day. And I volunteer with Cincinnati Animal Care, which is the Hamilton County shelter. And we have a lot of animals here at our house in our care.
I was going to say, you pretty much have your own shelter here at the house.
We do. Jeremy, who are you outside of not really paranormally investigating because you can't go with us because you have to watch the dogs?
No, I'm the dog babysitter. I mean, outside of this, I guess my personal interest would be music, mostly like metal and punk rock type things. I like to go to shows, like video games, a lot of retro stuff. So I'm pretty heavily into that. Was collecting a lot. I have slowed down, for space reasons, mostly. Other than that, I'm also involved in animals. I work at a vet hospital currently, which is very handy with all the dogs we had.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. And before we get into Spring Grove Cemetery's story, you and I talked for a while about a niche for our show since your amazing husband required us to have one.
Right.
What did we come up with?
So, some podcasts, they drink for different reasons, either mispronounce words, whatever. So we decided to drink just to drink because, well, we like alcohol.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so we'll get into this story here. So when I selected Spring Grove Cemetery as my topic, I thought it was going to be so amazing that I would have all of these haunted and ghost stories. And that was not the case. As soon as I started researching, I found out that Spring Grove is really devoid of ghost stories and validated hauntings. So I thought maybe I would scrap it as a topic, but I was reading articles about like their charter documents and how they got founded and the people that are buried there. And it was so interesting. I thought I'm going to keep this as an episode and take a stab at it. So here we are.
I'm glad you did because I've learned a lot.
So Spring Grove Cemetery, which runs along Spring Grove Avenue from Whitten Road all the way over to Northside, was consecrated in 1845. It currently holds 240,000 burials and about 2,000 new burials every year. And there are still 350 undeveloped acres available. So it is going to be generations and generations before it makes it that long of burials happening at Spring Grove.
Yeah, Earth will blow up before that happens.
Yeah, I'm not very hopeful.
It is the second largest cemetery of its kind in the U.S., so meaning a nonprofit rural cemetery. And it's the fourth largest cemetery in the U.S. in totality. So it has 733 acres, 450 acres of which are landscaped grounds.
Wow.
The largest in size is Rose Hill Memorial in California, which is 1,400 acres.
That is insane.
Yeah.
I can't fathom how large that actually is.
Yeah. I think also Calvary in New York and Abraham Lincoln are larger, not by a whole lot, but they are larger. And I know you asked me about Arlington, so I did look into that. So as far as acreage, Spring Grove is larger than Arlington by about 100 acres, but Arlington has 400,000 burials. So
that would make sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense because the nature of the burials being servicemen or service members. And then Spring Grove is a lot of mausoleums and big headstones, tombstones. Arlington has 2 mausoleums,
right?
And it's pretty much just the white crosses. So we are bigger technically. So if you live in Cincinnati, chances are you visited Spring Grove Cemetery at some point in your life. It was a mecca when I was in high school for all high school photography students.
Of course.
Had to go there. Its primary focus is on landscaped grounds designed for walking and picnicking, because back when it was created in the 1840s, it was common to picnic among your deceased relatives. You just go and lay out a blanket and eat with them.
I had an uncle that used to smoke cigars with my dad, grandpa. So same principle.
Totally normal then. Plus, the grandeur of the mausoleums and the tombstones is an attraction for visitors, even if they don't have family buried there. So about 20,000 people come annually just to visit Spring Grove from all over the world. When I was reading the founding documents, so normally at the start of these, I would reference my primary resources. For this one, it was a lot of newspaper articles and the founding documents, charter documents of Spring Grove, because I became obsessed with why Spring Grove came into existence, and what went behind the naturescape, like why all of this naturescaping. I was wondering, were Cincinnati just trying to get on the map for something, gain notoriety for something? And that wasn't the case at all. Cincinnati was actually a booming city back in the 1840s.
Right. I mean, being right on the river made it open for a lot of things. So
see, you're smarter than I am. I was.
I wouldn't say that.
I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I've lived here almost my entire life, minus a very brief stint in Kentucky. And I know very little about Cincinnati history. Yeah, I didn't know. Funny side story. I went with our friend Sandy to England for almost 3 weeks, and not like tourist attraction. I was living as a local because Sandy's from there.
Right.
I was at the local pub, and somebody called one of their friends, and he was like, "You got to meet this guy. His name is Tom, because he's obsessed with Civil War history, and he'll love to meet you." And I was like, oh, okay. So Tom comes in his blue jeans and his blue jean jacket, his white t-shirt, and this giant Civil War belt buckle. And he started asking me questions about the Civil War. I was like, I got nothing, man.
Yeah, I would be screwed.
I know very little. The look of disgust and disappointment on his face will follow me and haunt me forever. It's just like, how do you know nothing about your very young country? I know so much about England. I was just like, oh.
We were on the good side.
Yes, I blame the school system for not teaching me more about our history. So in my reading, I learned that Cincinnati was considered the first American city, as it was the first major city to be developed after we gained independence in 1788.
Interesting. I had no idea.
By the mid-1840s, when Spring Grove Cemetery was established, Cincinnati was the fastest growing, 6th largest, and noted as one of the most interesting cities in America.
Still is.
I love Cincinnati, but I don't think we're known for being an interesting city. We should be.
We're known for a lot of things.
Having an awful lot of sports teams for a very small population.
Skyline chili.
Skyline chili. Be about it.
Yeah.
So it was a major destination, like you said. River, commerce, immigration.
Yeah.
Huge city. Being a large and growing city did not come without significant problems, though. One of those being the deterioration of local church cemeteries and, honestly, the exposure of buried bodies.
Oh.
So as the city population grew, the city center kept expanding, and it started to encompass those church cemeteries where most people were buried.
Mm-hmm.
People went to church and were buried at their church cemetery. And the local churches were not equipped to keep those cemeteries up. So burial plots were really neglected.
So sad.
And with this large population, more people were dying. There was more need for burials. It got to the point where they were burying multiple bodies on top of each other. So, multiple bodies, dilapidated stones.
Yeah, that's setting it up for disaster.
Yeah. I imagine, I'm sure it wasn't, but I imagine like the poltergeist scene where the rain and the bodies come out. That terrified me as a child. That's kind of what I picture. So, It was on the minds of a lot of people. One of those included the Honorable John McLean, who was actually one of the founding members of Spring Grove Cemetery. And he was recorded as saying, quote, "A burial ground, unfenced and unprotected, presents a cheerless and sad spectacle. It would seem that the dead who lie in such a place had been strangely forgotten by the living. I envy the heart of no man who can be content to see the remains of a beloved friend this exposed and neglected."
What a guy.
So it wasn't just the sadness and the distaste of neglecting the deceased that was a problem, as I'm sure you can imagine. Bodies coming up caused some pretty unsanitary conditions, and the spread of disease.
Seepage.
Yeah. So I'm sure you will not be shocked to hear, although again embarrassed that I did not know this, that Cincinnati suffered from a cholera epidemic. Actually, 2 cholera epidemics.
Because one wasn't bad enough.
One was not bad enough. One in the 30s and one in the late 40s.
So that's pretty recent when you stop and think about it.
1830s.
18.
Sorry, not 19.
Yeah, it's not World War II.
It was cured. They figured out the cure in the early 50s.
Okay.
50s. So it was right there.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know what cholera is, outside of being a disease that I'm pretty sure you can die of playing the Oregon Trail, it is an acute diarrheal illness caused by a bacterial intestinal infection. And without quick treatment, it is most often deadly.
So shitty.
So shitty. And not deadly over days, that day.
Ugh.
So you woke up with stomach cramping. By noon, you are pooping your pants. And by bedtime, you're dead.
You have died of dysentery.
You have died of dysentery. So my brain, which is full of what I call brainworms, they're like those little sand eels that pop up and down out of the sand, are always firing, asking dozens of questions about whatever I'm reading or hearing, and take me on very interesting journeys. In this case, we're all about the questions of where people in the 40s pooped.
It's a very important question.
So we're going to detour a little bit because I know it, so now you do too. In the 1840s, there was not a sewer system, and only the finest, wealthiest American homes had indoor plumbing and flushing toilets.
Of course.
So instead of house toilets, there were street potties. And street potties were one potty in the middle of the street, and it was constructed of wood planks with a hole cut in the middle set over a brick pit.
Very, very sanitary.
The outhouses, basically.
Yeah.
Next brainworm fired and wanted to know if were these cleaned, how were they emptied, was it like porta potties? I'm mad at this brainworm because I learned that there was no policy on sewage disposal, and sustained rainfall resulted in overflowing, and all of that sewage went into people's homes and cellars.
Fantastic.
So, cholera.
Oh,
And in the 40s, there was not an understanding of how cholera spread or any idea on how to cure it. So Dr. Daniel Drake, and again, if you're from Cincinnati, you probably know who Daniel Drake is. He is the founder of the first medical college in Cincinnati. There's a park named after him in Kennedy Heights. He was hard at work studying cholera, trying to figure out the cause and the cure. Knowing it was causing diarrhea, he at least made a recommendation, and he published it in newspapers, that those suffering from symptoms should take to bed and drink hot sage tea. Not bad advice. It would have at least helped with the dehydration, but it ultimately would not have saved me.
right.
And while there's Dr. Drake on this one side being helpful and potentially exposing himself to cholera by helping people, there are people like dickhead Oxford professor John Scott on the other side, giving speeches about cholera being God's scourge and retribution from God for America's many sins. Discriminating quality.
That sounds a little familiar.
Doesn't it, though? So he's referencing the poor and the working class. So cholera is a waterborne disease, and we already said no waste management system, so all of this sewage is going down to the river. The river is where the working class worked, loading boats, washing clothes, etc. They were the most exposed and likely to get and die from cholera. And we learned a lot and did not say that any diseases were God's chastisement. We did, didn't we? 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we heard a lot of those stories. So we've learned nothing. We're not better people. So as I said, good news, there's a cure for cholera now. Founded in 1854 by Jon Snow, not Game of Thrones Jon Snow. And it's really Pedialyte and penicillin, oral rehydration, and a round of antibiotics.
That's so easy to, I'm surprised it took that long.
Yeah.
In 1840s, though, what do you guys think the treatment was? Take a guess.
Well, I'm a fan of drinking, and I know alcohol is big. I'm going to say drinking.
Okay.
I'm going to go with leeches.
Leeches. Closest. Thought curing cholera, curing thirst. Opium and bloodletting. So dehydrated people got high and more dehydrated through blood loss.
That sounds like a good time, too.
At least there was opium.
At least there was opium. They also thought that it might be an airborne illness, so they fired cannons in the city center and lit fires on street corners to clear the air.
I wonder what thought process went behind, I'm going to fire a cannon to clear the air.
Yeah, I would like to know more about the cannon guy.
Okay, I'll take that as a takeaway. I should research cannon guy.
Yes.
In a later episode.
I feel like
We'll come back.
there's so many like local celebrities, like what's Ezra Charles, like the boxer and stuff like that, but you don't hear about Cannon Guy.
Cannon
I
Guy.
want to know more about Cannon
No
Guy.
credit. People got scared, of course, and they fled the city, carrying cholera out into surrounding areas.
As they do.
As they do. There is one sub-city of Cincinnati, Mount Healthy, named so because all of the people that fled there survived the cholera epidemic.
Oh, that would make sense. I used to have a job where I had to deliver things, and they have like a historical plaque there, and it says something about the cholera outbreak, and I always thought it was funny that was like their claim to fame.
We survived.
We survived cholera. We did not die from that.
They did not die. At the end of the cholera epidemic, about 4% of the Cincinnati population died, so it's about 4,000 people. Wow. It's a lot of people for the time. 4,000 new burials needed on top of already overflowing cemeteries is what caused the founding of the Cemetery Association, which was an offshoot of the Cincinnati Horticulture Society, and thus we end up with why it is a landscaped arboretum, arboretum, basically. I said that right. Arboretum. So they met in April of 1844 and made the decision to model the cemetery on 3 other rural cemeteries in the U.S., Mount Auburn in Boston, Greenwood, New York, and Laurel Hill in Philly, all of which were inspired by Père Lachaise in Paris. And fun fact, Jim Morrison and Oscar Wilde are buried at Père Lachaise. And you know what Oscar Wilde?
Well, so I thought that I knew what Oscar Wilde died of.
Okay.
I had initially read
Bloodletting?
it died of a terrible earache or ear infection. Thought, that's tragic to die from an ear infection. I mean, but I've also read that he was in his late stages of syphilis, and that potentially led to his death. So
All right.
there are a number of things.
Okay.
Well, at least he had a good time getting there, I guess.
I'm going to guess it was bloodletting, that they tried to cure with bloodletting and he died of blood loss.
Just bled out.
Everybody died of blood loss. So this Cemetery Association quickly put their plans in motion to select a site for their City of the Silent, which this is how I will refer to cemeteries from now on.
City of the Sun.
It's an awesome my goth band, which I don't have, but need to create. They selected a site that used to be a farm, Girard Farm, and included 166 acres and cost them $16,000, which today would be about $645,000. And then in 1894, they expanded, purchasing the additional 434 acres for about $330,000, which today would be about $10.5 million.
It's a nice chunk of change for back then.
And a nice chunk of land.
Yeah.
Before the ground was even broken, 200 residents had already bought into the cemetery through the purchase of 50 square foot plots at $100 apiece. That's enough for the burial of 2 people. And the committee immediately hired John Notman, who is a designer of the Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philly, and Adolf Strauch, who was a world-renowned landscaped architect from Prussia, because they wanted a naturescape cemetery to honor the dead. And if we were drinking for mispronounced words, this is why we're not, because
Yeah.
don't pronounce anything correctly.
We would be dead by the end of this episode.
I tried really hard on that one. There's actually a large lake at Spring Grove with an island in the middle. And there's a mausoleum on that named Strauch Island, and that's where Adolf and his family are buried.
I want to be buried on an island.
I don't know. I'll see if I can make
Sounds so peaceful. Please do.
I'll work on that.
Okay.
So they met in April of 1844, and the cemetery was open to the public on September 1st, 1845. That is fast-moving
Yeah.
work. You'd never see that today.
No.
Gotta take care of those dead people.
17 months. So while the stories of hauntings, as I said, are lacking, trying to find stories of hauntings led me to really interesting stories about people in this city of the dead, or the silent. The first one was Charles Brewer. So if you watch YouTube videos about Spring Grove, you are destined to come across a video about Charles Brewer. On his grave marker, tombstone, headstone, I'm not sure what the difference between a headstone and a tombstone is.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Whatever the big one is. There's a bust of him. It has very realistic looking eyes. And there's a story that his eyes follow you, and that he was an optometrist and he had his own eyes put in the bust. None of that can possibly be true. Birds would have pecked him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can just imagine birds.
Yeah. Or they would have disintegrated, or, whatever, dehydrated into a raisin. I don't know what happens to eyes when they sit out. I work in eyes. I should know that, but they're all liquid.
I could see them drying up as raisins.
Yeah. So no eye raisins. But none of that means that he was not an eccentric guy. So you could have, after I read his stories, told me that he demanded his eyes been put in there, and I would have believed it.
So they were, I think I read they were actually glass eyes, weren't they?
They're very realistic glass eyes. Yeah.
So cool.
So one story of this eccentric gentleman I found in the Daily Alaskan newspaper in 1908, and it reported that a neighbor's servant went over to the house to fetch something, looked under their bed of Charles and his wife Georgia, and found 2 coffins and nearly passed out.
That's not morbid in the least.
I think I keep my slippers under the bed. I don't.
It'd be kind of cool to have like a bed that was like a coffin. Charles had no problem confirming the story for the paper. Said, yep, absolutely. He had the local undertaker make he and his wife coffins with 3/4-inch copper lining to prevent corrosion from the elements and preserve them for centuries.
Oh, and you're weird.
Yeah. Own your weird. He owned his weird, man. He was quoted as saying, I am living well now and want to be assured that I'll be buried right when I'm dead. I'm not going to be put in some flimsy coffin.
Not like some pleb.
Nope. He felt it was safest to keep them in his house, and nobody saw them moved in, so nobody knew they were there. The coffins came at a price of about $1,000 for both of them, so about $16,000 today.
$16,000 for the 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that reasonable to you? 8 for one. I have no idea.
I don't know either. I hope I never know.
I do and ones with like the viewing window, and they look like under submergibles. They're made of like metal. I won't let them.
Well, I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. We found a YouTube video of someone in that looks exactly like you, didn't we?
We did. Watching an exhumation video, there is a person actually exhumed from Spring Grove who looked remarkably like me.
I think you should dig into that.
I don't want to dig into it.
It's gonna be like some sort of weird, time travel continuum thing.
Hey, you all have a everybody has a doppelganger, right?
True.
Charles referred to these coffins as their wooden overcoats. I thought that was a him thing, but actually I watched a show the other day where somebody called a coffin a wooden overcoat. So I have to think that was just like a phraseology of the time.
I haven't either. It makes no sense, but we'll go with it.
I thought it was cool, but there's another story of him which appeared in the Columbia Herald of Tennessee in 1907. And this article, I feel like I need to read the title of it in a newscaster voice, like the old movie motion pictures they played in World War II, and the newscaster would come.
Oh, yeah. They showed a little war.
Yeah. I don't know that I can do that voice, but it was, men fight over size of feet. Fat Cincinnati capitalists pummel one another fast as wind will permit.
That sounded pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah. And I'm definitely interested in the story. I would like to know more.
So, this Cincinnati guy named Jacob Baum, who was the head of the Baum Safe and Lock Company, was exiting a streetcar, and he tripped over Charles's feet as Charles was waiting to get on the streetcar. Jacob yelled, "Why don't you keep your big feet out of the road?" To which Charles replied in more flavorful language, "It wouldn't be such a problem if your abdomen weren't so large." He got on the streetcar. He started to sit down. Jacob Baum got back on the streetcar, and chubby fists started flying. Charles fared far worse because he became wedged in between the streetcar seat.
Oh, God. How embarrassing.
So all he could do was cover his face while Jacob just wailed on him until he literally ran out of breath. And had to exit the streetcar to catch his breath, at which time Charles unwedged himself from the seats, snuck out the back, and headed to a drugstore to have his wounds treated.
Wow. What a story.
So up until this point, I was digging on Charles. I was like, this guy is some fun. I bet he money.
This guy knows how to party.
He knows how to party. But his later history is more problematic than being so goth that he had coffins under his bed and getting in fat guy fights. He was arrested in 1908 on charges of arson, and the story kind of lends some explanation to why he and Georgia had coffins under their bed. So Charles had 2 daughters, Ruth and Helen, from his first marriage. And they had moved out of their home to live with friends in Kentucky, claiming mistreatment by their stepmother, Georgia. And they actually sued Charles for support.
Oh.
The court ordered Charles to provide them with income collected from his Franklin building, because he was a real estate mogul. The Franklin building was a large 5-story building with a lot of tenants. So when the clerk of trust for his daughter's estate went by the Franklin building to conduct an assessment, he found no tenants. Charles had evacuated all of them. What he did find in one of the rooms was a lit candle connected to a can of kerosene, and 2 sticks of dynamite.
What? It's very Looney Tunes-esque.
Right? So still eccentric, but really, you wanted to get out of paying your daughters so much that you were going to blow up the
building.
Them.
Maybe somebody had cholera and they were
Maybe they were clearing the air.
At least he evacuated before he set all this up.
He did. He did do that.
So hope was not lost in Charles.
I don't know how great of a guy he was, considering he had several other pending litigations against him, and the litigation with his daughters had tied up about $20,000 of his finances. So he actually sent a suicide note on January 17th, the day prior to his arrest, to his friend and his attorneys, stating that he would be ending his life that night. His friend called the police. The police went to his home, found him alive and well, took no further action until they arrested him the next day for trying to blow his building up. He was returned home following the arson charge in July of 1908. And quickly thereafter, he was found wandering the rail yards in Gallon, Ohio, which is about halfway between Columbus and Cleveland. He was returned to Cincinnati to have his sanity examined, and he was sadly deemed to be insane. He was returned to the care of Georgia. His mental health continued to decline, and she had to eventually place him in Longview Insane Asylum in Carthage. So not the best end to his story, but it was an interesting read anyway.
Yeah.
Outside of Charles, there's a haunted story of the Dexter Mausoleum and the white wolves that guard it. So the Dexter Mausoleum was built in 1869 for whiskey baron Edmund Dexter. While not a distiller, he was a rectifier. I didn't know what that was.
And what is a
I don't know what that is.
Okay, a whiskey rectifier, meaning he bought barrels of raw whiskey from various sources in Ohio and Kentucky and then blended them into his own recipe for distillation. So, and before we go more into his story and going back to our show's niche of drinking, it is a complete coincidence that today on the show we are enjoying Dexter 3-Wood bourbon from local distillery Brain Brew Custom Whiskey out of Newtown. And this recipe is in honor of Edmund Dexter. Yeah. It was voted one in 2020 or something, like one of the top 12 bourbons in the world.
It is quite good.
Yeah, it's good.
It's very smooth, has a nice finish.
We aren't sponsored by Brain Brew or anything like that.
But Brain Brew, if you are listening, we will gladly accept a sponsorship. Send us free liquor. We'll promote it.
We can be reached.
We can do that.
explorations@gmail.com.
Don't worry. We're going to head over to your distillery and tasting room. They have a tasting room in Newtown. So
Okay. Yeah, we'd have to go.
Weekend outing for that. So back to Edmund Dexter. By 1939, his enterprise was one of Cincinnati's leading wholesale liquor houses. And in today's terms, he would be a millionaire many times over.
Nice.
Yeah. So he had a mansion. It was on the corner of 4th and Broadway. He was from England originally. And so Charles Dickens and King Edward VII stayed with him here in his home.
Thinking about 4th and Broadway, I'm imagining it's not there anymore, which is sad.
I think it
Is it?
is. I tried to look it up on Google Maps. I'm directionally challenged. I think it is, but we can look. You're probably right. It's probably torn down.
I love old buildings. I've lived in it.
We can go to the distillery. We can get a bottle. We can go to 4th and Broadway.
Force them out for
Force them out.
Force them out. Yep.
He was an adorable guy. There are pictures of him. He had a long white beard. He had the friendliest little eyes. He did die at the young age of 61, and he is buried at the Dexter Mausoleum. And if you've been to that mausoleum, it's the coolest one in the cemetery. It's got these like gnarled trees. It's on a cliffside, super gothic buttresses. It's very cool. The ghost wolf story goes that there was a group of boys hanging around the mausoleum, and I guess as boys do, there was a dare that took place.
Yeah.
Okay.
A double dare.
A dog dare.
Yeah.
Triple dog dare, right?
Yeah.
They had to jump a fence into the mausoleum. So 2 of them went in. They said they heard a deep growl from in the crypt. They saw 2 snarling white dogs with glowing blue eyes. One let out a howl. They went running, jumped the fence, and since then, there have been continual stories of these ghost wolves, dogs haunting the cemetery.
Now I'm intrigued.
We live right by the cemetery. I have never seen them, nor have I heard howls from any.
I think the last time I was there, the only animal I saw was a skunk. And I think I would have rather seen a howling dog.
Yeah, for sure.
Whistle pigs. There's a lot of whistle pigs in there.
What's
For those that don't know what a whistle pig is, please explain.
Whistle pig is y'all call it a groundhog. It's a whistle pig.
So we did a investigation a couple of months ago, up in Madison, Ohio, where I learned what a whistle pig was because a couple of our friends that was with us were intrigued by the whistle pig.
Which I'm shocked you don't know. I didn't know what a whistle pig was.
Had no
Because
clue.
you're from the foothills of Appalachia.
And the foothills of Appalachia.
I
I've never heard of whistle pig.
No. But there is a whistle pig bourbon or something that we saw at the store.
Oh, yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. I called it out because whistle pigs, yeah. Our friend Eve's a big fan of the whistle pig. She runs out and talks to them, and
The animal, not the
the animal, not the bourbon. She might be a big fan of the bourbon too. I haven't asked her. Outside of those two stories, there aren't really any others of hauntings. There's a Norman chapel that had a jail in the basement, but it was really a drunk tank for drunk carriage drivers. People have claimed they hear screams coming out of there, but why would
drunk people be? Yeah.
I don't buy that one either. If you watch YouTube, you'll see some haunted stories, but very unvalidatable, so I didn't include them
Right.
in anything. There are some notable burials in the cemetery. Over 40 Civil War generals are buried there, and quite a few sex workers, which at the time were referred to as sports.
Sports? Like, what a sport.
Hey kid, what a sport. Well, so
strange.
brainworm fired off there. Wanted to know why we called sex workers sports. And from what I can tell, bordellos were referred to as sporting houses. And a popular phrase at the time was living the sporting life, which meant the good life of money, liquor, and women. So I am assuming from those two things, sex workers were called sports.
It's better than saying you're a man whore.
So does Spring Grove have its own red light district?
It does not. It does not. I did also look at that. It does not have its own red light district. You can't look at Spring Grove Cemetery records either and see that they were sex workers, but you can cross-index to death records, and that's how you can prove that they were sex workers. While dogs are not allowed in Spring Grove Cemetery, alive or to be buried, there is one dog buried there. His name is Old Man. He was a special dog who could sort correct change on command. And the superintendent, who was friends with Old Man's owner, could not bear to see them separated. And there's one dog buried.
Oh, how sweet.
Sweet.
Today, Spring Grove's visited by thousands to take in history, architecture, amazing landscaping. They offer events throughout the year, from full moon tours, tram tours. I think they do Segway tours if you're into Segways. Shakespeare in the park.
Yeah.
I think you said they were doing movies.
Yeah, they've started doing movies again in the cemetery.
They have family days, and there's one day of the year where you can bring dogs
Just one.
to walk. One day.
And what day is that?
Whatever the hottest day in June is.
The day that no one wants to bring their dog?
Yes, the day that no one can fathom bringing their dog. Yeah.
So if you work at Spring Grove
Please
and you're listening to this, please change it.
Yeah, please change it to like November. If you haven't ever visited Spring Grove Cemetery, you should definitely do so. You can find their list of events on their website, or you can just go and walk around. It's a 5-mile walking loop. Just go walk around Spring Grove.
It's very pretty.
It's very pretty. I've not been through the whole thing, but
yeah,
what I've seen has been beautiful.
I know there's a lot of Kroger family buried there.
Yeah, makes sense.
We can see one of their Washington Monument looking things over the fence from our house. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you are all comfortable enough with yourselves to be as eccentric as Charles Brewer, but not so eccentric that you try to blow up a building to prevent having to give your kids money.
Own your weird.
Own your weird.
That is going to be my new motto. Own your weird.
Cody, what's on the docket for our next episode? That's all on you.
Yeah. So the next episode involves more drinking.
Okay.
As we talk about Covington's local favorite Irish watering hole, Molly Malone's, and its sordid history.
Okay. So are you going to have more paranormal in yours, or is it just
There are a few paranormal experiences at Molly Malone's that I'm going to share.
Okay. Awesome.
So stay tuned.
Awesome. So thanks to everyone who listened. We hope you come back next time. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach us by email at sinisterexplorations@gmail.com. That is Cinister with a C. Get it? Cincinnati, Cinister. I'm so creative. We do actively go on paranormal investigations too. So we do hope to have some video coverage of our next one on our YouTube channel here soon.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in the process of planning that. And eventually maybe we'll get to the point where we can take others on paranormal investigations with us.
Yeah.
Requires some paperwork and some insurance coverage.
Right. Darn insurance.
So that's it for today, kids.
Thanks, everyone.